Okay, we're live. Hey, everybody. It's Antrea Live, and I don't know, Mark Rossetti came to say hi to us. I don't know how long he's going to stick around, but Mark, Mark, what's going on? You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mark. I work with Jay and Amin over in Sig Windows work in Kubernetes project. Work at Microsoft, and yeah, I'm here until my son wakes up.
Okay, Amin, you want to go ahead, and then we'll get started? Introduce
My
yourself.
name is Ami. I work with Jay on VMware.
All right, let's see. Um, so interestingly, I just tried to create a cluster and it failed. So today we're going to try something. We're not very well prepared today. I will warn everybody. We only have we are going to see if we can read through the CNI spec and find get clusters, find delete cluster dash dash name equals antrea. Okay. I'm going to delete this one and I'm going to try to create a new one. See what happens. The last one totally failed, and I have no idea why. So what do we got in the news? Let me actually 1 second. Chinchi's here. What's up, Chinchi? Okay. If folks are, let's see here. Let me get 1 second. Let me get the show link. Someone just asked me for it. YouTube. Here it is. All right, there we go. Okay, cool. Yep. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's see if this comes up. And using default kind network. So we're going to try to spin up a Antrea cluster using the same way we normally do. And depending on if that comes up, Docker images failed to load. What's this? Docker images. So is that not Docker pull? What is that? Is that failed to load? Have you ever seen that before? I've never seen this one before. Docker pull. I bet that was corrupt. What if I do Docker RMI? Can I remove that image and then repull it? I don't know. Just an idea. I'm going to delete that cluster and try to do it again. I have no idea what just happened. Yeah. What's up, Zach? Zach just joined. What's going on? I can't do one window at a time, Zach, but I can make it bigger. Let me make this one. You know what else I can do to make it easier to read? I can do this. I can do, how do I make it so this is only, can I make this so that it's only like one? Okay, so while we try to spin our kind cluster up again, what do we got in the news today? Containerd 1.6. Mark, you want to tell us why you're so excited about this one?
Yeah. Containerd 1.6 is the first release that properly supports HostProcess containers on Windows, which are the equivalent of privileged containers, which are enable us to do a whole lot of things in Kubernetes on Windows that we weren't able to do before.
Yep.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Such as
run your CNIs as a daemon set if using containerd as your container runtime.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah. So that's exciting. So now it's actually official. Privileged containers on Windows is a thing now, even though we're not technically supposed to call them those. What's this? I mean, you want to tell me about this one? You just pulled this
Yeah,
one up?
so someone from SIG Security create a document to get the best practices on policies inside Kubernetes. So there is a long list of supported policies and how they could be implemented as a good read.
Cool.
It includes like network policies and
Cool. All right, we got this one, and then we've got what's this? Is there an update on this?
yeah, this was merged. The cap policy, network policy starts from Ricardo.
Oh yeah, we never mentioned this, I don't think, on the show. So yeah, the network policy status cap is in. So now we're going to be able to start adding conditions for network policies. So I guess, what is it? The CNI providers are going to update those. Like my CNI provider sets the status of a for per policy. Okay, so it has a status field in it, and then now any network policy you have, your CNI provider can optionally, I guess, update it and say, I don't support this. Is that the idea?
Yeah, that's the idea. So you have particular conditions where you can define if the network policy is applied or not, and add the stats of events for this.
Okay, cool. Nice. Okay, let me update this. Okay, cool. Thank you, Ameem. So let's see. Okay, so we got a cluster up. So what should we do now? So let's go see. So if I go into this one, if I go in here and I say Docker PS, and then I'm going to make it bigger for you, Zach. Here we go. If I do Docker exec dash t-ic1 bin sh, right? So I'm in one of my nodes now, and let's see if we can go to cd etc. Go to bash so my terminal isn't horrible. So if I ls etc, where is the CNI configuration? Is it in etc or is it in op?
Etc CNI.
Yeah. So okay. So let's start by looking at this in like an antrea context, and then we can like back out and actually look at the spec, right? So, all right. So inside of this etc CNI netd10 conf list, I've got a version 0.3.0. I've got a name antrea, and I've got these plugins. So I've got the antrea plugin, and it defines the type of IPAM that antrea wants to use. Then I've got this port map, and then I've got this bandwidth plugin. So now there's also an opt. So each one of these, and then we'll look back at this spec in a second, right? So here's the CNI spec. So for folks that don't know this, the way this works is the CNI is a specification. So it's a specification for defining the way that your container runtime puts a network on the containers when you start them, right? And so your container runtime is like, runc, or if you're doing Linux, or like if it's Windows, there's only one Windows container runtime, right, Mark? HCS shim?
Well, it's HCS. HCS shim is
HCS.
shim wrapper around that. But yeah, the host compute system, subsystem, or system.
Okay. So HCS is the Windows CRI. Linux, many CRIs, most commonly containerd runc, right? So I'm going to just enter that in the comments so folks who are not listening can see this. So that's normally the way it works. And then the way that what you do is your CRI calls your CNI to add a network to a container. Okay. So that's it. So now let's go and look. So how does a CRI know what to tell the CNI? right? So the CRI needs to ask the container to make one of these. So the CRI needs to, I think the way this works is when you set up container D, right? So when you set up container D, do we give it antrea as an option? So if I go to cat etc, I guess it's in etc. Is there anything, or is it an opt cat opt CNI?
Yeah, you can specify the config dir and a plugin dir in the container D config. I think it's usually opt CNI bin.
So what's in here? Nothing. Yeah, so I think it's in the toml. So if I go to cat etc container conf, oh, what is it? Why is that cat etc container d conf that?
Yep.
Right? And I should have a CNI in here, right? No?
Unless you're using the default one.
Yeah, so the default, we can go fish around and see. So let's see what's normally in my container D config, right? So normally in the container D config, we have, what do we have? We give it unpacked layers. We give it a snapshotter. We give it a default runtime name. That's runc. We give it a runtime type. We give it, and that's container DV2. We give it a sandbox. We give it a pause image. If Pallavi is here, she's probably laughing at looking at this because she's been fighting with pause images in container D for like 3 weeks now. And then missing huge pay. I don't know what that is. And then something here. So we're not actually specifying this. So that must mean that there's a default. There must be a default in the container D toml, config toml, right? So I think I actually looked this up the other day for another reason, and I'm going to try to see if I can find it. I think it was here. Cool. Where was it? No, maybe here. Yeah, here it is. I have it. Hold on 1 second. Here we go. So it's here. So in here, right? This is the container config, and I guess you can specify in here the CNI configuration, and you can specify the bin directory and the conf directory of where the CNIs are called from. And I wonder whether it's, I don't see it in here, which is weird. So I guess my first question is, how are we giving this to, I don't see a default path here, right? I don't see a default. Yeah,
maybe it's in another folder that just the
CNI. Where would it be? Let's see.
There is a defaults folder, but I don't see these values defaulted there.
It's interesting. So what if I clone it? If I clone this down, cd source git clone container D. Well, I already have it. A good thing I already had it. Okay. So if I git grep opt grep bin grep CNI, here we go. It's hard coded in here. Or no, that's an MD file. That's a .md file. So this is an MD file. Oh, here we go. Here it is, Mark. There you go. Okay. So, okay, let me make this big. So actually in the container D source code here, right? So in here, I guess the default actually plugs in opt CNI bin and etc CNI net D. Okay. And so that's, I think that's like, those are like defaults in the code. So it looks for a bin directory and a conf directory. And then from there, when container D starts, every time you start a new pod, it's going to go and it's going to, based on the CNI spec that we're about to look at in a little bit, sort of parse through this. So like, let's go, we can go in here and look, right? So where is it? So, whoops. So let's assume now this is our path, right? that it's looking in OS here, right? It's going to go. So when containerd starts up, right? Since we haven't set this value, right? It's going to go and it's going to look in this default hard-coded thing. It's hard-coded in the Go for the toml, and then it's going to see this, right? So it's going to read this. And then now from here, we'll ask ourselves what happens when it reads this file. So it reads this file, and then it sees that it wants to do this antrea thing and this port map thing and the bandwidth thing. Now, do either one of you all know what port map or bandwidth do? Now we're going to go over, look at the CNI spec and try to understand what this JSON means. Doesn't sound like it. A meme is at a loss for words.
So I know bandwidth is doing some traffic shaping in your pod. Port map maps some ports directly, but I'm not sure how this is being used.
Okay, so let's see. So these are, this is this idea of plugin chaining. And I suppose reading this, I think this is, so we can see here, this is a list. And so the first thing that's going to happen is Antrea is going to do something. And then after Antrea does something, I think it's going to pump some JSON out. And then I think then that is going to get plumbed into here. And then that gets plumbed into here. And then at that point, whatever was when you did your CNI add operation, which is the thing that containerd calls when it's after it creates your pod, after that, containerd, runc, whatever you want to call it, runc is going to assume that the network is created and whatnot. So what is this specification? So here's another example configuration that they give us. So this is cni.dev doc spec version, right? So you can read the specification here. And so this is CNI version 1.0. So it turns out we're only using 0.3.0 right now. I don't know if that's good or bad or whatever, but it works. The CNI is a pretty simple API, right? It's just add and delete and check, I guess. I don't know what else it does. I mean, maybe a lot of other things that wind up going on under the hood, but it's a pretty, for the most part, it's a to make a working CNI that you don't have to implement all that much. And the complexity comes in, I think, once you start looking at the way these plugins are configured. So in this one, they have the same thing. They have a plugins directory, just like we have in this Antrea cluster. And then Antonin's here. And who else is here? Oh, Perva. Hey, man. It's been a while since we've seen you. Good to see you. And Fanghan. Where are the plugins defined? Says Fanghan.
The binaries are on OPT CNI bin, but they are defined in this configuration file.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So if we go to opt CNI bin, Fang, opt CNI bin, right? If we go in here, then we see there's all these programs, and these are binaries, right? So if I ls -alt-h opt CNI bin, okay, each one of these is a binary, right? And these are callable, and so like for example, when it says type antrea, right? Type antrea says like there's a binary program in this directory called antrea, and after you make a pod, I want you to plug the network in. I want you to literally do a call. So containerd or is it containerd that does this, or is it the runtime? Does containerd send the CNI information to the runtime, and then the runtime starts the process and then calls the network stuff? Or is it containerd tells the runtime to start the process, and then after the process is started, then it goes?
I think containerd does it, but I'm not positive.
Okay. I'm kind of wondering here. So, I have a diagram I made once that doesn't have it though. If anybody knows, I see Antonin's here. He might know. So Grayson, what's going on? Grayson, since you're here, and I like that picture of what's his name? Jason State. Is that Jason State? Jason State from the guy that beats everybody up in the movies. Fanghan. Okay, you got it. All right. So what? I don't know. I'm wondering who calls I'm gonna check. Does CRI call CNI plugin, or is it containerd? I think it's containerd. How container runtime? Okay, this guy wrote a blog post on this. So config net config. Okay, does he talk about the CRI in here? Listens for requests from the Kubernetes agent. The scheduler located each node through the CRI kubelet is instructing the container runtime to spin up a container, and the runtime is executed by calling in a standard way. So the runtime is executed in a calling of the runc binary and flannel, the binary that implements CNI. The above process. Here we go. He has a diagram. So the kubelet cryo, containerd, OCI image, OCI runtime. So CNI. So from the way he's described it here, these are orthogonal to each other. And I think that makes sense that that the process itself maybe is created and then the network is set up afterwards. So if anybody wants to answer that, let us know. But I think we can keep going. Feel free to interrupt me. Okay, so this is type bridge. So these are the plugins. So this again is a name. There's a name that in this configuration, they're expecting opt CNI bin to have a program in it called bridge, right? And then so the containerd would call bridge, right? And then after that, I would call tuning, and then after that, I would call port map. So this is the configuration that you get. And so I guess they've broken the CNI spec. If you go to the CNI specification, they have specification, conventions, CNI tool. So CNI tool, I mean, you know a little bit about this, right?
Yeah, I think you could explore this.
Okay, what do you got?
Yeah, just go in the examples. I think
Is
this
it
will
here?
work. Yeah.
Oh, yeah? Okay. So you're saying, okay, so
you have, for example, we have some binaries here. We can use like the example that's create a network configuration, this line, and run the binary.
can I do this without, do I need Go to do this?
You have the binaries. I think this is only compile.
CNI tool, can I literally pull the binary down?
Yeah.
Maybe do they do releases here? Let's see if I can just literally get it. Oh, they don't do it. They don't compile it for me. Okay, so yeah, I don't have Go on this inside of this. Oh, wait, you mean I don't need to do this in a container is what you're saying?
I think you can call the binaries and pass, but you need to be in the namespace, in the network namespace.
Okay, I don't have Go on here, so let's avoid doing this right now to keep the pace up. So, what does this do? It looks to me like this, the way you normally use this is you would literally take like this whole JSON thing here, and then you'd echo, and then you write out a CNI configuration. You call this a CNI configuration,
Right.
and then you go and you make a new network namespace, and then you set up, so then you set up a binary path for your CNI, which is similar to what we have here, right? So like opt CNI bin, and then you run CNI tool, and then you have CNI tool makes the CNI add command. And what is this thing? This is var run. This is referencing
this is the
namespace here. And then after I do this, then I can run check, and I can check whether this thing worked or not. So this is just a way to call the individual CNI. So let's go back now and look at the spec. So, okay, so the CNI spec, where do they define the verbs, right? There should be an add.
Section 2.
Here it is, section 2. Okay. So add. So the CNI specification has add, it has delete, and it has check. And I think that those are the only verbs, right? Oh, and it has version.
Yeah.
Okay. So the CNI, okay, so you have these three things. And so does that mean that every CNI plugin has to implement all three of those? I guess it does. So every CNI plugin, I guess every CNI plugin has to implement these, right? And so the antrea binary, can I find that on here? There's probably an ops. So I can call that, right? Can I just, what if I don't send it anything? What does it do? Opt, bin, opt. So if I do this, what does it do? Okay, so the default, if I actually just call this, the default is it returns version, right?
Yeah, we can take a look in the code of this. Is in the repository command antrea-CNI
Okay.
CMD.
So if I go to the code base and I go into CMD and I go to antrea-CNI, Antonin was the last person. What did he do here? What is this all about? This is a pretty straightforward exchange. We cannot use the default protobuf package. Okay, so Antonin has been up in here doing stuff. Main.go. Okay. So what do we do here? So action add request, action check request, action delete request, and then version. So I guess the skeleton is skell. That's so okay. So skeleton, yeah, that's a thing that you can vendor in from the CNI people. So the CNI people have a thing that you vendor in, and it allows you to easily make a CNI plugin. And I guess the arguments that it takes are these. It literally takes these in order, so we can probably take a look at container networking CNI. Right. Okay, so let's go here. Here it is. Yeah, right. Okay, so if I go in here and I go add, here we go. So when I run this plugin main, right? This is something that we implement here. Plugin main, and it takes in functions as inputs, and it takes an add, a check, a delete. And so what we do in Antrea is we vendor in the container networking sort of factory that allows us to make a new container networking plugin, and we literally just call this command and we send it in order the add, check, and delete functions. That's a good idea to look at this. I mean,
yeah. So on PKG CNI, you can see what's going on.
okay.
PKG CNI.
All right. So PKG CNI. All right. So if I go into client.go, all right. So if I go, oh God, I clicked on something. Here we go. So now if I go in here, okay, we have these constants. And so I guess, so I'm kind of wondering, like, why is it that we're on 0.3.0 in here? How come our Antrea 10 conflist is 0.3.0? What am I like? What Antrea version am I on? Antrea version. I'm sorry.
Oh, this is the CNI specification.
Yeah, that's the version of the CNI spec to use.
Okay, so that's set up for me by Antrea when I installed it, right? So I'm installing Antrea 1.4.0, right? It's writing this file out, and it's writing out 0.3.0. So
but this
I guess
is not the Antrea version, right? This is the CNI version, the spec version.
okay, but why are we using that version? How come we're not using a newer version? Maybe because to limit incompatibility cases, we can strive to support multiple releases. Along with that major version itself, this is harder to. Yeah, so I'm kind of curious, Antonin, since you're here, why is it that Antrea is writing out CNI version 0.3.0? Is it because we? Am I asking a dumb question here? I mean, what? I mean, it says 0.3.0, but Antrea is on 1.4.0, and CNI 1.0 has been out for a little while, or maybe I don't know how long CNI 1.0 is, but I assume the CNI spec is.
I think it's near, but not that.
If I go to CNI releases, I mean 1.0 came out what? So we're on 1.0.1. So what came out before 1.0.1? CNI. Mark didn't know he was going to get into all this drama today. So 0.6. So yeah, 0.3.0 is pretty old. Let me see here. I mean, maybe we just don't need anything from the newer spec. 0.3.0.
I think you are taking a look in the plugin. So,
Well, who writes this file though? Antrea writes this file when it comes up, right?
yeah.
Like Antrea is writing this file and it's writing this CNI version when it comes up. This must be hard coded somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, that's correct. The version is 1.
Okay, so if I go in here and I open VS Code, thank you, Microsoft, for this.
Probably whatever's writing the CNI config is just using 0.3.0.
Sorry, say that again.
Like whatever is setting up Antrea for you.
Well, antrea-agent sets up Antrea, right? On the node, right? So when you kubectl create your CNI, right? Then at that point, like if I do the same thing, I don't know. So I guess let me see if I can SSH into another cluster and just see. So like, what if I go into? I have another one somewhere here. Another
Part
box.
of the setup should be writing those files to those directories on the host, though.
I mean, so you're saying, wait, so you're saying that you think, for example, kind does this?
Not kind. Like I'd imagine that the cluster comes up with no networking, and then you're able to run this with like host network, and then as part of running the CNI daemon set, it's gonna write files to. It's gonna map those files in, and that's just hard coded somewhere in whatever. A network load is doing that.
Wait, I got it. I found it. Hold on. I think I know. Because if I look at this, hold on. I know where to look because I know that there's a build. I know there's a build directory somewhere. Where is it? It's in
right at the top there.
Yeah, build. I have an idea.
Probably in the YAML somewhere for
Antrea. Here it is. This one? No, base.
Or maybe is it just an antrea.yaml? Is it?
See, here it is. No, wait. Here it is. Look at this.
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
Okay, so this is hard coded in the YAMLs, right? So we hard code this. Can I file an issue? Like, what if I filed an issue right now? Why are we on 030? Maybe somebody's already filed one. Issues Antrea. And then another one of my like issues that's like half baked. Here we go. 0.3.0. Has anybody watched about this? I don't know.
Most of the CNI configs I have seen are all using 0.3.0 too. So.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So well, I don't know. We'll wait to see. I don't know if Antonin or Junjin, either one of you are here, and you can tell us why we use 0.3.0 in so many of these. And so, like, it would be interesting now. Like, what if we checked in another? I have another cluster, right? So, like,
what if we change this to the new version and create a pod?
Change it to the new version and create a pod. Okay. Yeah, we could do that and see what happens. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Like, what are they going to do? You're right. So I have to apt. Okay. So how do I do that? I guess I have to apt get update -y, and then I have to do apt get install vim, right? So I can edit that file.
Right. So one thing that's
if it's
cool,
in your
like,
cluster, this is probably just in a config map somewhere. You could probably find it and just edit it there.
I could edit it, but I don't think if I edit it, antrea-agent will hot reload the configuration.
You could
do
the daemon set. Yeah, redeploy it.
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah, that's actually. Why is it asking? What is it?
What did you do?
How am I? Why does it want all this? You can't install. Okay, cool. Yeah, you're right. I could do that. So 1.0.0 is what you want to do, I mean?
Yeah, let's do.
All right. So here we go. Let's try it. Let's try this. Okay, so
Antonin's waiting for a StreamYard link to join to tell us that we're doing everything incorrectly.
okay.
Jay.
okay, Anthony's gonna come in here. All right, here we go. All right, hold on a second. I'm gonna send you one. Okay, I'm gonna send it to you in upstream Slack. All right, Antonin. Antonin, hey, Antonin, here he is. Okay, there we go. Okay, cool. So, okay. So what happens now? So if I do this and then I ps-ax. Let's see. What do I have? Do I have anything running on here? No. Let me go. My favorite thing: kubectl scale deployment core DNS. Okay, so let's scale this up so that we have one running on this node, and then let's see if it starts. Here's Antonin. What did we do wrong?
Yeah, I don't think you did anything wrong. It's just I think CNIs use this version because when the CNIs were written, this was like basically the current version, and that's kind of the version that was used through kubelet and docker shim probably.
Okay.
And if you look at 0.4, for example, what it does is it adds a check command. But if no one's using the check command, then it doesn't really matter which version you advertise. And I'm not totally sure how this version is used by the container runtime, what kind of validation is done. I think that's something that would be worth looking into. Because containerd, for example, is going to be consuming that file, right? And it's going to be probably checking that version. And it's possible that based on the version it finds, it behaves differently. Or maybe it doesn't behave differently, which also would be interesting.
Okay, so it's worth... Okay, so this is kind of something interesting worth looking into then.
And I think no one has moved to CNI 1.0 basically. So that would be... Because that's probably a breaking change on like 0.4 compared to 0.3, which just adds a CNI check command. And if no one's using the command, then nothing's going to break anyway.
Ah, okay. All right, cool. Okay, so this one has this has check in it. So we don't use check very often. So the kubelet and containerd and all that, like we don't... Wait, next week we're going to have Mike Zappa come on, and he's actually writing the check implementation in containerd, right? I mean...
Yeah, he was looking at it.
Yeah, so I guess one reason why we don't do this, one reason why we don't care is because containerd doesn't implement it. But luckily, Mike Zappa is going to solve that problem next week. So if you come back on the Antrea Live next week, the guy who's actually solving this problem, that I don't know if we'd call it a problem, but who's going to make it so that it's actually worthwhile for us to upgrade to 0.4.0, he's going to be here. So cool. I forgot, what were we doing?
We were taking a look in the pods if the pods come up.
Okay, yeah. So let's see if this comes up. So do I have a core DNS? So I didn't get a core DNS pod to come up. So if I do kubectl get pods -a, is it complaining? No, they all came up, but I don't know if any of them came up on this node. So what if I scale deployment? What if I scale it to 1 and then I scale it back up to 8? And then if this doesn't happen, I'm just going to do a daemon set. Okay. Oops. Okay, so if I do ps-ax, it looks like nothing. It looks like it's not landing on here, so something must be failing. So if I do kubectl get, it might not like that. kubectl get pods dash
Oh,
a.
it say it's not ready. Do I get nodes? It says it's not ready.
Yeah, it's not happy. No, they're all happy. So the nodes look happy. So it must be. Where would I see this? I would see it in the kubelet logs, right? If I
Journal CTL container D maybe full container D or kubelet.
can I
You
look?
could try describing the node too. It puts node conditions on. If you already had the networking set up though, something would have set network ready.
Yeah, so, yeah. It said
You
well because
started from-
initially it worked, right?
Yeah.
Does it have core DNS here? No, it doesn't. So journal ctl-f-u kubelet. Do we see it complaining at all? Okay, so let's see. What if we scale it back down? Okay. And then we scale it back up. And here we go, 8. I feel like it's not even. Oh, here we go. An error. What is that? Pod deleter container. I don't see anything. I don't see it complaining about the CNI. So maybe we should.
Well,
just
so like,
try
wouldn't you
Mark's
probably
idea.
need to schedule a pod to trigger container D to do all the networking. Just laying that config file down, I don't think is going to have any effect unless container D's. Unless like the CRI is going to be adding or removing pods.
But it would be because I'm scaling
Yeah.
core DNS down to 0 basically, and then adding 10 pods to the cluster. I mean, it's kind of a stupid test, but it would.
Is core DNS a host network? Is it using host network? I know there's different paths to container D
No.
for setting up. See, okay.
Core DNS always uses the. I mean, in general, it always uses the pod network. But that is a good question, so we can confirm that. So yeah, see, these are all on the 10 subnet. Okay, so a better thing, maybe we can test Mark's thing. So kubectl get config map -a. Can I do this, Antonin? If I can I change this? Can I change this Antrea CNI conf list and then restart my Antrea agents?
So if you change it on the disk, then you don't need to restart the agent, and restarting the agent should overwrite your changes. If, as I think Mark suggested, you update it in, I think it's part of the config map, right, in the antrea.yaml, and you apply it. Yeah,
This was Mark's idea.
If you change it here and then you reapply that YAML. No, 1.2, okay, yeah, and then you reapply that YAML. Then it should be good.
I mean, I just kill the agents, right?
You kill the agents, but after reapplying the YAML, right, you have to update the actual config maps. Right now, you just change the YAML manifest. So.
Well, I edited the config map.
Oh, you edited. Oh, okay. I thought you changed it on disk. Yeah. So you just need to restart the agents now.
So now I could just do kubectl delete pod that -n kube-system. Is there a way to like?
Yeah, you can remove the pod name and then pass the label. It's -l. There's a label basically.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah, and the label I think is component antrea-agent. So if you do delete kube-system -antrea-agent, then it should delete all of those agents.
Like this?
Equal antrea-agent. I think it shouldn't.
Oh, you're right. It did it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, so there's a good way to hot roll out everything.
And while we
I'm
wait for
interested.
that, actually, I was looking at the libcni Go code, which is what is used by container runtimes, like containerd, to interact with the CNI. And if you look at the implementation for check, how they invoke check, they actually do a version check. And if the version is less than 0.4, they return an error directly to the container runtime. And so as long as containerd doesn't use check, then us advertising a version of 0.3 just works fine. If containerd starts using check, then we need to advertise a version of 0.4. And in a way, it's like surprising to me that we don't do that. And I think that was for backwards compatibility with older version of Kubernetes, because we do implement the check call.
So you do implement it. It's just that you don't expect people to call it. So we probably should do
Yeah.
a no.4 here.
Yeah, I think if you
Should we file an issue?
I think if you do 4, things should keep working. If you go to 1, I think they're backward. They're breaking changes. So, but it is actually interesting to move to 1 and to see what's going to be failing, right? Because I think if you move to 0.4, nothing's going to fail. Everything is going to be fine. I think if you move to 1.0, and I think Chan from the Antrea team is a PR open to do that, but he was kind of like experimenting with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. We just noticed that.
I mean, it's hard, right? Because you have to make sure all those pieces keep working, right? Maybe you want to support older versions of Kubernetes, older versions of containerd, newer versions of containerd. So all of those pieces have to basically kubelet the container runtime and the CNI. They all have to be able to kind of like speak that same version. And I include kubelet here because I think if you're using Docker shims, and that's kind of like part of kubelet, and it's going to be invoking the CNI.
Docker shim's gone now, though.
Yeah, that's why I said older
Future
Kubernetes
ones, yeah.
versions, right? It depends how far back you wanna go. But I think Docker shim being gone is kind of like makes things easier here. That's one less thing you have to worry about.
So I'm going to file as a placeholder so we don't forget this conversation. And I think that would be an interesting thing to look at. And so this is a very serendipitous time to be having this conversation, given that Mike Zappa's coming on the show next week. So, Per, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for coming to say hi. Where are we? So now I do. Now let's see. kubectl get pods -a. Oh, kubectl. So now let's scale core DNS down to 0. Actually, scale it to 1 because I'm afraid that, like, what if nothing works and the whole cluster breaks after this? I want DNS to still be working. Okay, so now I'm going to scale it down to 0 and kubectl get pods -n kube-system. Let's confirm that it's scaled down. Okay, now none of my agents have an 0.3.0. So if I go in here and I cat etc CNI here, it should be 1.0, right? Yeah, see? So I've overwritten, so I'm using the new version. So now what happens? Any predictions here? You think it's going to work, Antonin?
I don't know. You're using containerd, right? I would say that depending. I don't know if containerd there's a version that's able to use like CNI 1.0. I think it's possible that you're going to see a containerd error.
Oh, it does not look happy.
I don't know. Do you know where we would look for core containerd errors? Or maybe it's just gonna report them to the
Fail to create. So yeah, it's gonna send them. It's gonna plumb them back up through the containerd to the kubelet. So failed to set up Sandbox, incompatible CNI versions.
So who returns this message? Is that containerd? Is that
I think that would be containerd plugin supports those versions, right? Because right now in Antrea we don't advertise 0.4, for example. So
All right.
Or you do advertise 0.4, you don't advertise 0.1, which means we could actually do 0.4.
well, right now what you change, right, is you change the CNI version in the CNI config file to 1.0.
Yeah, but if I do this, it'll work, right? So if I do that and then I do your same trick again, right, where I delete those, right? So now I'm deleting all of the antrea-agents and I just edit the config map to be 0.4.0.
Yeah, right now it would work, but this error we're seeing is containerd or your container runtime looking at that CNI file we've been editing and seeing that the supported CNI version is 1.0 and complaining because, oh, I'm containerd and I don't support CNI version 1.0 right now.
No, but it's saying plugin.
Yeah, but
Is it referring to itself as plugin?
I mean, we can check where that error comes from, right?
Let's see.
But actually, I would say that's the standard CNI code,
it
which is vendored by containerd, right?
It worked. See?
Cool.
Yeah, it worked. So it was referring to this file. So, okay. Yeah, so it was somehow Antrea is advertising 0.4.0. Where would it be advertising that? Antrea is telling...
That's the file you're editing. That's the only file. That's the only place, right?
Yeah, but what is this 0.20, 0.30, 0.31?
Those are the versions supported by containerd. But to be more accurate, those are the versions supported by the CNI library, which is vendored by containerd. You know, the CNI library is like the standard CNI code that the CNI working group maintains.
Oh, so okay, so there's a library that we vendor into containerd.
Yeah, I'll put the link in the.
Okay, I got
put it in the YouTube chat, right? And containerd is vendoring a version of that library, and each version of that library supports like a set of CNI versions.
So there's this go-cni, and then that is something that's vendored in, so we can go here. And then it's vendoring a version.
Yes, yes. Then it's importing a version of container networking CNI.
Yeah, it's importing a version of this. So right now the version of kind that I'm running is using a version of containerd that vendors a version of go-cni that vendors a version of container networking CNI that is not this that I'm looking at.
And what's interesting right now, you're looking at top of tree, and you see that the version here is v1.0, which is probably aligned with the CNI version they're supporting. But if you look at the exact version of containerd used by your version of kind, and you kind of like woke up that dependency chain, the tag you're going to see here is not v1.0, it's going to be v0.4 something probably. But now, if you were to move to top of tree containerd somehow, you would be able to do that.
It would work.
And in that case, the failure would probably be somewhere on the Antrea side, because I think there were some breaking changes in the API.
In 1.0?
In 1.0. But from the containerd perspective, things would be fine. You would not see that incompatible CNI version, because Antrea would say, I'm using 1.0. Containerd would be using a version of libcni that supports 1.0, and so everyone would theoretically be happy. But because Antrea doesn't exactly support 1.0, you would see a runtime error in the antrea-agent probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So containerd is vendoring go-cni, and then on startup, so you start a process. When you start, you do runc. And then after that, containerd calls CNI add. And then it's doing that. It uses go-cni to do that, I guess, probably, somehow. And then that version is, okay. That version is then looking at whatever versions it can handle. So then in there, then it parses the YAML config or the JSON parses the CNI JSON config, and then that.
Well, there is one more step in the chain, which is that go-cni actually imports what's the name? Container networking /CNI, which is agnostic to the container runtime and is maintained by the CNI working group.
Yeah.
So there's like one more step, which is that one exactly.
This one, right? Yep. So this imports that, and I suppose that's probably what parses the JSON fleet.
Correct.
And
yes.
matches O.4.
And that thing has a hard-coded list of versions that are currently supported. But I think that people will, of course, strive to keep these backward compatible. So especially with people using potentially older CNI versions and things like this. So even when containerd is updated in your Kubernetes cluster and actually supports 1.0 and maybe starts leveraging check, I would expect that things would keep working. It's just that you wouldn't get the benefits of check, for example, if your CNI doesn't support it.
So can you tell us how Antrea uses check? We only have 5 minutes left, so this is a good time to learn this.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that Antrea uses check. Antrea provides check, and we should probably advertise that by at least updating the CNI version to 0.4.
But how far does it go? Like when? So I guess what I really mean is how does it implement it, right? Like does it? What is a check from Antrea's perspective? Is it like if I go break some OVS rules and I call CNI check, but will that still will check dynamically like figure out that something's wrong, or does it just check that there's a nick in the pod?
Check that your pod is connected to the OVS bridge with a vSpare on Linux, for example. I don't think it's going to go as far as check that no one has messed with your OVS flows. I mean, Antrea should have, I think, that reconciliation logic where if you kind of like IP tables, right? If you delete an IP table rules manually, you wait like a reconciliation cycle of like 30 seconds or something, and then your role is going to come back, right? So Antrea should have the same thing for OVS flows. Now, I think check just make sure that your pod is still connected to the OVS bridge, and maybe that the IP configuration of the pod's interface is fine, because that's not something we have a reconciliation loop, right? If you exec into the pod and you change the IP address, maybe that's going to break things, and that's not something you can recover from.
Where is the check implemented? Can we look at it?
So where are you now? You are in, I think it's in agent at the top, yes, CNI server. And it's going to be, I think if you look at server linux.go, and you check and you find check somewhere.
The CNI plugin connects to
server.go, sorry.
Connects to antrea-agent via gRPC, right?
That's correct. So the CNI binary itself is just a thin gRPC client. So it doesn't do anything itself, really. So what it works is it talks to the antrea-agent over gRPC and basically forwards everything that comes from the container runtime to the antrea-agent. I think that's pretty typical to do that because you want your logic to actually happen in the daemon set, right?
So let's look at the check specification here. So check is a way for a runtime to probe the status of an existing container. Plugins consideration. So this was actually really important for us on the Windows side because things actually go wrong in Windows. And so Mark came back to laugh at that. So so things go wrong on the Windows side, and for example, like we have a race condition in where right now we have a thing that like waits for the plugin to be up, and then like it like waits in a GoFunc, I think, it like goes and it tries to wire the Windows pod up, and it sort of polls until it's ready, and then it comes back. And I think that's like why this check thing is kind of important. It would be really nice if Containerd just used this because then you could have all that logic in containerd and your CNI wouldn't have to do things like that. But the plugin must, right now in Antrea for Windows at least, I think we do some polling logic before we return that the NIC is set up.
Yeah, so check would be useful for tasks that, at least in the Antrea case, need to happen asynchronously, right? Compared to the CNI add, and for which you want to be able to return errors and do things like retry if one of those things go wrong in the asynchronous tasks.
Oh, so you're saying yeah. Well, I guess what I'm saying is that you would want containerd to run a check and then retry an add.
Yes.
That right? Like, so plugin must consult the previous result to determine expected interfaces. Plugin must allow for later chained plugin to have modified networking resources. Plugin should return an error if a resource included in the CNI result type was created by the plugin. The plugin should return an error if other resources not tracked in the result. I feel like a lawyer right now reading this. So the plugin should return an error if it is aware of a condition where the container is generally unreachable. Ooh. Okay. Must handle check being called immediately after an add. Therefore, should allow reasonable convergence for any asynchronous resources. This is the, plugin should check on any delegated IPAM plugins and pass. Okay. Runtime must not call check for a container that has not been added. Okay. So here's the contract. So here's how we implement it. So we go and what do? We container access lock container, defer unlock. What are we locking?
It's to prevent race conditions, I think. Well, I'm not the expert there, but I think it dates back to kind of like when we first added support for Windows, and at least at the time there were multiple calls to the CNI commands for the same pod.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we wait and we say, if you just called add, we're not going to do this while you're calling add because we'll get confused if you're calling it a second time or whatever. We lock. So we check IPAM. So this is checking. So this is going, and
I think that's what I was talking about, which is probably make sure that the IP address is still configured for your pod. Yeah.
Driver.check.
This is a delegation for the IPAN driver, right?
Okay. So that seems not specific to the pod, though. This is just checking that the IPAM is configured in some...
No, that's specific to the pod. I think what you'll have in the args here is something that identifies the pod. Okay,
so you go to the driver, like the IPAM driver, and then the driver says, okay, yeah, I can confirm that this particular pod has been allocated an IP by me.
Yeah, because if you think about IPAM plugins like host IPAM, which we use in that case here, I mean, we have, it also implements the CNI interface, right? So you just kind of pass it the arguments you get from the container runtime.
Yeah.
So it can also perform its own CNI check.
Yeah. So here's the IPAM that we're talking about here. So, okay. So then we CNI CMD response. Okay. So we return that, but we don't do anything else. I feel like we could do more here, but maybe I'm just making it up. Couldn't we get clever and go talk to OVS and look if the NIC is attached or whatever, something like that?
Well, we didn't check what validate prev result is. I don't know if we actually do something else here.
Parse previous result. So this is... Oh, here's your CNI 0.4.0 hard-coded again. Okay.
Yeah, so we do also have that check in Antrea, which is strange because the only version we advertise in the CNI conf file is 0.3.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to also note that this should be a constant in this issue that I filed. So it seems like 1 also seems like we hard code. O.4.0 in the check implementation. Should that be a variable? Okay. Feel free to, I don't know if this is really a actionable issue. Feel free to feel free to close it if it's not. So parse previous result and then validate previous
So
result.
validate prev result will actually do some checking, right?
Parse container interface from results. So this is going, and
I would say check interfaces here. The last call, pod configurator is probably what you're looking for in terms of doing some checks, and check container interface.
PC pod configurator.
Yeah.
Check container interface. So then I talk to this pod configurator, and then I go and I check that. Okay, so now I have the Sandbox ID, and then I go in here, and then OVS hardware offload. Sandbox in previous result doesn't match. Okay, oh, look, so now I'm going and I'm looking at the interface name, and then I grab the interface based on the container name, and then I check the container's MAC config. Oh, so we're checking a lot of stuff.
Okay, and I think validate expected interface IPs is
Yeah. So then I go, and then this makes a call to.
So this basically looks at all the IP configured for the container and make sure that you didn't mess with them, or one didn't vanish through some magical operation.
Okay, so this is still at the Linux sort of OS level. It's not at the OVS level. It's at the Linux place.
Yeah,
right?
I would think there are some OVS checks, but I would need to look at the code.
But I think there's not, because it's right. Like,
well, that wouldn't be in this function. That would be in the parent function. But
no, it just returns. See,
that would be in yeah. I guess I would expect it to be in check container interface. But if it's not, then
no, it's not. So we don't. No, it just goes to the Linux OS level. veth pair. Okay, cool. All right, so this is cool. So we're out of time, but this is I'm going to add one more bullet here, which I'm going to say is related, which is that also we should comment what we do in our check implementation if we are going to start supporting newer CNI Spec versions, right? So maybe we should add a comment about, i.e., do we check OVS routing rules, etc., or just NIC attachment, just for good measure. Cool. All right. Anything else folks want to talk about? What's this? Vamo, I don't know what that means.
What?
I wouldn't click on that if I were you.
Okay. We're out of time. Thanks everybody for thanks everybody for coming to hang out today. Thanks Antonin and Mark for showing up, and Amin, and I guess Amin and Chinchi, and who else is next week? Mike are gonna do next week. Are you doing the show with Mike next week, Amin, or is it just Chinchi?
Yeah, me and Chinchi are going to. Yeah.
Cool. All right, so the three of them are going to be doing next week, and we're going to go another level deeper into the exact same thing we did this week. We're going to go into the check implementation in Containerd. So we're going to look at GitHub, Containerd, GitHub. We're going to go look at, let's see where the issue is. Check I don't know. I don't see it, but it doesn't matter. So next week we're gonna go next level on this. So come back. Thanks everybody for coming. Antrea Live every Wednesday, 4 o'clock Eastern. Like and subscribe.